morning, everyone. I hope you had a good weekend. If for some reason you didn't finish the quiz last Friday, make sure you do that. There is a warm-up quiz for today, just for attendance and your participation points. Quadratic formula. I know you all studied quadratic formula during freshman year. You had to sing it to your teachers to get points. Write the equation in standard form first. So if you have an equation, something times x plus something times, a value times x squared plus a value times x plus a constant equals 0, that's in standard form. Okay, so then we take those coefficients, the a, b, and c, and we plug them into this quadratic formula. Quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. There's little nursery rhyme things on YouTube. If you have trouble with that, I think that's actually included in the formulas that you get to use this year, but I will verify that. So you need to identify your a, b, and c, substitute them into the formula, and simplify. So that's the process. Let's see if we can do that. Let's take a look at number 1. Is number 1 in standard form? Something times our x squared term plus something times our x term plus, in this case it's minus 63, that's fine. A constant equals 0. So if we have all of that, then we can figure out the a, b, and c. So let's go ahead and just write them down. A is equal to what, guys? What's the coefficient of my x squared term? 1. And the b is equal to 2, and the c is equal to negative 63, yes. Because in standard form, this is plus c. If this is negative, then that means your c is negative. If there isn't a value for one of these, then it's equal to 0. Okay? If that term is missing, this value is equal to 0. All right. So look at the formula there and see if you can plug in the values just in the standard form of the equation. Okay, it would be the opposite of b, which would be negative 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 2 squared, minus 4ac. 4 times a is 1. Times c is negative 63, and all of that is over 2 times a. Okay? Any questions on how I did that? Pretty basic? Simple? Okay. Now we just work through, and you have to know your order of operations to do this properly. Okay? Think of the square root here as parentheses, so we want to do what's under the square root radical first. So in looking at those, which of the terms would I simplify first? The exponent. So we have 2 squared is 4. If that were negative 2 squared, it'd also be 4. Just as a point of reference, minus 4 times 1 times negative 63. So it's going to be minus a negative number, so I'm just going to go ahead and make it plus. Does everybody follow that? Got 2 negatives here, so I'm just going to make it plus. And what is 4 times 63?
252.
Yes, 252. And that's all over 2, right? So 4 plus 252 is 256. Does 256 have a square root? Look back a couple days and see if you see your perfect square numbers there. We listed them, I think, on the first page of this. 16? Yep, that's correct. So, we have here is x equals negative 2 plus or minus 16 over 2. Excellent. So if we do that, negative 2 plus 16 is going to be 14 over 2, which is 7. And negative 2 minus 16 is going to be negative 18 over 2, negative 9. Okay, so I didn't leave room to write my answer, so x is equal to either 7 or negative 9. Pardon? Oops, sorry. Guys, let me know if you can't see what's on the board. Okay, so I want you guys to look at number 2 and try to solve that on your own. I'll pause for a second. Yes, look at number 2 and try and solve that on your own. Okay, you guys need another second? Couple of things I want to point out is when you're doing this, especially if you're plugging this into a calculator, you want to do what's under the radical first and simplify that. And use parentheses here. If you have negative 11 squared, that's different than the opposite of 11 squared. Okay, so if your term here was negative 11, put it in parentheses. It'll keep you from making a sign mistake. The negative times negative is positive, so 121 plus 240 was 361, and that is equal to 19. Okay, square root of 361 is 19. The opposite of negative 11 is positive 11. And 2 times 6 is 12. So 11 plus or minus 19 over 12 simplifies to 30 over 12 and negative 8 over 12. Those simplify 5 halves and negative 2/3. So our solution are those two numbers. What this means is that if I plug in negative 2/3 into this equation, what value will I get? Anyone? If I plug in negative 2/3, then this will be equal to 0. Okay? If I plug in 5 halves, this will also be equal to 0. So the solution that we're solving for is what x value makes y equal to 0. Okay? Or makes this equation true. Because we've already got it set equal to 0. do another one. This one's no harder, no easier. Let's figure out our A, B, and C. A is equal to -1. B is equal to 2. And the C is on the wrong side of the equal sign. So we would have to rewrite that equation, subtracting 1 from both sides to get it into standard form. So therefore my C is equal to -1, not +1, but -1. Everyone understand the purpose of that? So now you just plug in your values. These numbers are all small, should be easy. So we have x is equal to the opposite of b, plus or minus, that's a -2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 2 squared, minus 4 times a times c, okay? Minus 4 times -1 times -1 is going to give us -4. It becomes positive, then negative again. So -2 plus or minus 4 minus 4. So 4 minus 4 is 0, right? All over 2 times a is -2. So x is equal to -2 plus or minus 0 isn't going to change it. So just have, yes, -2 over -2, which is equal to 1. So, yes, x equals 1 only. Okay? What does that mean? What do you think that graph of that equation looks like? Okay? So it's a parabola because it's a quadratic equation, right? And it's a quadratic equation that only has one solution. Okay? So if I were to type that equation in and or graph it rather, it is going to touch the x-axis at only one spot. Okay? Only one spot. Now let's go back and look at a couple of the other equations we had here. Let's look at number 1 there. Let me graph number 1 for you. Let's see, x squared plus 2x minus 63. This one, because it's minus 63, the y-intercept is -63. So if I graph this, the y-intercept is going to be way, way down on my graph. Okay? And then you can see these 2 points where it crosses here should be our answers, -9 and +7. But to see the whole graph, I would have to zoom 0 to fit. And that would put -63 right here. Okay, but you'd still have -9 and 7 here. So this is just a way to find the solution where this is equal to 0 without having to graph. And sometimes the numbers are not easy to tell. Like here, you can say, let me graph this equation, 6x squared minus 11x minus 10 I didn't clear out first. This makes it much more difficult. If I graph that, this is going to cross the x-axis at -2/3 and +5/2. You can't really tell that specifically from looking at the graph. There is another solution. If we were graphing to solve this, we'd graph y equals 0 as well. And that would put a horizontal line here on the x-axis. And then we can see where they intersect. Second trace, 5 intersect. And we tell it our 2 points. We move our cursor close as we can to the intersection. And it tells us negative 0.6666667, which we all know that's equal to 2/3, right? So negative 2/3, that matches here. And if we do that action again and go to the other point where it crosses as our guess, we end up with 2.5, which is 5/2. Everybody following? So, the quadratic equation here is just a numerical method for finding those intersections. They're not always easy, and they're not always a real number. So if we had the square root of a negative number, we would have a complex solution, which is imaginary, and that's not going to show up on your calculator in any case. All right? So let's keep going. This one is not in standard form. Let's rewrite it to be standard form. What would that look like? I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. And I'm going to add 15 to both sides. Those cancel out. I'm left with negative 2x squared. 3x minus 4x is minus x, and then plus 15. That equals 0. Now I have it in standard form. I can pull my a, b, and c. A is negative 2, b is negative 1, and c is 15. Does everybody see why b is negative 1? It's minus x. The 1 is understood to be here, right? And we had 3x minus 4x is negative 1x. So, quadratic equation, x is equal to the opposite of b. The opposite of b is going to be positive 1. Plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared is positive 1 again, minus 4 times a times c, negative times negative is positive, 4 times 15 is 60, so it's 1 plus or minus the square root of 61, 60 plus, I'm sorry, negative 59. No, I'm sorry, that was plus, positive 61. This was 2, never mind. Oh, forget that. Sorry, guys. I left the 2 out. So negative times negative is positive 8 times 15, which is 120. 120 plus 1, actually. 1 plus 120. So 1 plus or minus square root of 121 over, I left out the 2a up here, which is 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4. Okay, so this is 11, 1 plus or minus 11, over negative 4. So 1 plus 11 is 12 over negative 4, and 1 minus minus 11 is negative 10 over 4. Both of those will reduce. X is equal to negative 3 or 5 halves negative. Negative 5 halves. Is that correct? Actually, guys, these were both negative, so that's positive 5 halves. Negative 10 over negative 4 is positive 5 halves. And that's a comma, not a 1. Everybody try number 5. So when we put this in standard form, there is no b x term. So b is 0, a is 9, c is negative 25. Plug those values in. 0 plus or minus 900 over 18, which is plus or minus 30 over 18, reduces to plus or minus 5/3. So that's positive 5/3 and negative 5/3. Or 1 2/3 if you wrote it that way is fine too. Okay? Any questions? All right. If I'm going too fast for you, those notes are in your note packet for the week with the solutions at the end. So let's try number 6. It's non-standard form. We rewrite it, 8x squared. We subtract the 10x from both sides. There is no c term. Set it equal to 0. So our a is 8, b is equal to negative 10, and c is equal to 0. Plug those in. X is equal to the opposite of b, which would make that positive 10, plus or minus the square root of b squared is positive 100 minus 4ac. So 4 times anything times 0 is 0, right? So if one of those terms is 0, you could just skip the math and do 0, right? Okay, so all over 2 times a is 16. The square root of 100 is plus or minus 10. So 10 plus or minus 10 all over 16 is equal to 20 over 16 or 0 over 16. So 20 over 16 reduces to 5 over 4. And 0 over 16, of course, is 0. So my x is equal to 5/4 or 0. Any questions? We're good? Okay, so that was the last page of last week's packet. We should have done that Friday, but I was feeling a little generous for you guys, so we took it easy. Now, there's new packets starting this week. I just passed it out to my class. If you're at home, you can print it. You can always just write down the notes. That's fine. Just want to do the even ones because I think this should be review, and you should be doing fairly well at this point. I did staple it backwards, you're right. Okay, so this one is a little more complicated. It's not that it's harder. So obviously it's not in standard form, so we have to rewrite it. We subtract 8x from both sides and add 1 to both sides. So that leaves the new equation 2x squared, negative 2x squared, minus 8x, and 17 plus 1 is 18 equals 0. A is equal to negative 2, B is equal to negative 8, and C is equal to 18. So x equals the opposite of b, so that's going to be positive 8 plus or minus the square root. And negative 8 times negative 8 is going to be 64 minus 4 times a times c, so 4 times negative 2 times 18. It's positive 144. And then 144 plus 64 is 208. And you can't take the square root of 208. So let's think about it. What is the next option? If we can't take the square root, it's going to leave a radical. It's going to leave a radical. So what are the factors here? Both 64 and 144 had square roots, so there's going to be something that factors out that has a square root. Let's see if we can figure out what it is. 208 and 16. Okay, so I could rewrite that as the square root of 16 times the square root of 13. Therefore, that's all over 2a. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So my denominator is negative 4 here. So I have 8 plus or minus the square root of 16 is 4. We can't take the square root of 13. So we get here. And we're looking at our solution and we're like, will that simplify? So yes, 4 goes into all 3 of these terms. So we divide it by 4. We can divide it by negative 4 if you prefer. And if we do that, so negative 4 would go negative 2 times plus or minus square root of 13, because 4 over 4 is going to be positive 1 and negative 4 over, 4 over negative 4 is negative 1 and negative 4 over negative 4 is positive 1, so we're still plus or minus there. No, it's over 1, so you can just leave the denominator at 1. Okay? Let's look at number 10. Excuse me. It's not in standard form, so let's rewrite it. Negative x squared plus 10x minus 8 equals 0. A is equal to negative 1. B is equal to 10, and c is equal to negative 8. So x is equal to negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 10 squared, which is 100, minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 8 is going to be 32. So that's all over 2 times negative 1 or negative 2. So x is equal to negative 10 plus or minus 100 minus 32 is going to give me 68 under my radical all over negative 2. This would simplify. 68 will factor into 4 and 17. So that's negative 10 plus or minus 2 radical 17 all over negative 2. 2 goes into all 3 terms, so we're going to simplify. X is equal to positive 5 plus or minus square root of 17. Yes, sir. You can certainly do that. Here, I could have written this as negative 2 times 5 plus or minus radical 17. Ran out of room there. All over 1. So, it is not, because negative 2 over negative 2 is just equal to 1. If you need more practice, the answer key shows these over here. I'm going to do this last one and then let you guys do your homework assignment, which was going to be homework 7 here, just the even numbers. Just post that. There's 6 problems. It's a little more than I normally give you, but short lesson. So last question here. I want to get all my terms on the same side. So if I write this, 5x squared, I subtract the 4x, subtract the 5, leaves plus 4, equals 0. A is 5, B is negative 4, C is positive 4. So my x is equal to the opposite of negative 4 is positive 4, plus or minus the square root. B squared is going to be 16 minus 4 times A times C, which is 4 times 5 times 4, all over 2 times A so that is 4 plus or minus 16 minus 80 under the radical over 10. So this is a negative number, okay? 16 minus 80 is going to give us negative 56. 64, I'm sorry, negative 64. Just thinking of another problem. 4 plus or minus the square root of 60, negative 64 over 10. What is the square root of negative 64? Just 8? Right. So 4 plus or minus 8i all over 10. 2 will go into all those values. So we can simplify it into 2 plus or minus 4i over 5. Okay. And the homework assignment, if you want to print it out, I listed it separate as the assignment. If you print out the notes, it will print with it. It is homework 7, which, pardon? Yes, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. Just the even. Okay? Have a good day.